Ladies and gentlemen, coming to you from the Colonial Dungeon, this is the Court-Martail Podcast! Introducing your host for this evening, he has a bald spot on the top of his head, and he weighs in tonight at a number you don't need to know. He is the Colonial Loudmouth, Sean McCarty!
And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, one and all, to another great, spectacular edition of the Court-Martail Podcast. I am, as always, your Colonial Champion, Sean McCarty, and today I have a very, very special guest. He's a man who didn't want to take the bus because he was too happy riding the short bus. He's a guy who would look at a crowd of people and walk into a room full of monsters and choose the monsters, especially if they're energy drinks. He's a guy who's so excited about hating John Cena that he no longer hates John Cena. If this doesn't make any sense, neither will he. Welcome to the show, JoshAgeddon, once again. Good to have you back. And we're copyright struck.
I can't turn it off.
Just like that. Just like that. So, if we survived the copyright strike, then welcome back.
I didn't know how much of the song to play, but I needed to play it just to set the tone.
Well, that is, yeah, it's going to be something will be born here today. Whether it is a love or a hatred for this show remains to be seen. But how you doing, man? Good to have you back on the show.
I'm good. How are you?
I am doing, as we are all doing, here in this time of fun things and exciting moments. And,
yes. And quarantine.
Yes. And fun, exciting quarantine moments. Yes. And one of the things that is so exciting about quarantine is that you, the fans, get to sit here and listen to us make inappropriate jokes and not defend them.
Yeah, you can't go anywhere.
Because you can't go anywhere and you can't do anything, and we don't really, I don't pay attention to most Facebook stuff, so it's like, yeah. But for those of you who are avid listeners, good or bad, we thank you for being here. Today, I always have a game for you, if you've noticed, Mr. Geddon. I always have a game for you. Today's game is going to be the career grade.
Oh, no.
So what I am doing is I'm going to give you a list of wrestlers, and you are going to give them a career grade.
Can I go lower than F?
No.
Okay.
It has to be from A to F, but you can do pluses, minuses, or just, I guess, like ejected from the school of wrestling, I suppose. If you really want to go that far. I don't think any of these names you're going to want to do that to, because I haven't picked anybody absolutely abysmal for this one. I'm going to make us think about these ones, because I'm not going to put people like Orange Cassidy on the list, or people, or, you know, the really dumb guys, or the people you hate the most. Like
I think he'd be suspended multiple times from your school.
Well, Braun Strowman is not on this list, and anyway. I made sure he wasn't on this list because I knew what the answer was going to be. So we're going to try and do these with a little level of actually having to think about them. But we got a good list here, and we're going to start with CM Punk.
Okay, his career in WWE?
Career in general. As much of the career as you want to take into account describing these events.
Honestly, probably a B+, which might surprise you.
A B+. It does kind of surprise me a little bit that you would have the gall to call CM Punk a B+ player.
I know, right?
But why?
But that means he's going to get a main event against Triple H and two other guys in the future. So, the reason I'm going with B+ for his entire career is because even though he's my favorite wrestler, he's had a spotty career. I mean, True. He was great in the independents.
Yep.
He had those amazing matches with Samoa Joe.
Yes, he did.
But WWE was kind of a huge speed bump after speed bump after speed bump for him. So I don't think he ever got to realize his true potential.
No, but it's interesting because he's one of those guys, one of the few guys where he's hit WWE roadblocks and actually made those roadblocks work better to his advantage. You know, at least particularly like through the summer of Punk, And the WWE Summer of Punk, for those of you, because I know there's going to be a portion of these fans who are going to jump down my throat if I do not make the distinction between the Ring of Honor Summer of Punk and WWE Summer of Punk, which ended in Kevin Nash. That ended in a Kevin Nash versus Triple H sledgehammer on a ladder match, which was actually not half bad, but it was still... that was how the Summer of Punk ended.
Somehow took a bump off a ladder through a table in 2011. Impressive for the man.
What a time! What a time to be alive it was, and an odd time. But I would agree with a B plus, because I mean, unfortunately, if we had 5 more years of Punk, even if he had left to do like independence, or if he had stayed in wrestling for another 5 years, I think we'd look on him even more favorably than we already do. But because he went to MMA and did what he did in MMA, is where we are. Yeah.
That unfortunately happened.
It did unfortunately happen. I was rooting for him though, but that was rough. That was rough.
Is it bad that I knew that? I figured that was exactly what was going to happen if he went to MMA, and I was like, maybe nope.
I couldn't see an outcome where Punk would just start beating people who had been doing it for 8 to 10 years up to get up to that point. I think having him in UFC specifically was a bad call.
Yeah.
Because UFC is where the top MMA fighters go, but there's like so many preliminaries and things you have to do to get to that point that Punk really had no business being in the ring with best guys.
But you gotta admit, you gotta say this. He had the Mickey Gall to go out there.
Yeah, and that's the kind of crappy puns that have gotten you multiple appearances on this show.
Hell yeah. I can't help it.
And moving right along, next one is Undertaker.
I would say A minus.
Okay.
Because, I mean, he's a definite legend. He was one of the biggest names in the Attitude Era, and he had a long career, but there was also a bunch of hokey, dumb crap that he had to do, like the whole burying Paul Bearer in cement thing.
You mean burying him in oatmeal?
Yes. God.
No, 2004. Why?
But yeah, he did a bunch of hokey, dumb crap.
Yeah.
Plus, his more recent stuff with it. Isn't he like officially retired now?
Allegedly.
Okay. The more recent stuff like that match with Roman Reigns at WrestleMania 33, the Goldberg match, the match at Crown Jewel with Shawn Michaels.
Oh, the Goldberg match. Oh.
That kind of stuff brings it down a little bit.
It does. But
if it wasn't for that and the dumb hokey stuff, then an easy A+. But when you add on the hokey stuff and him wrestling in matches where honestly it would have been better for everybody if he just retired already.
Yeah.
You got to take it down a little bit.
And it's tough too to judge the Undertaker off hokey stuff because really the gimmick itself is so outlandishly hokey. But props to him for making it work the way he made it work for so long. But of course, that kind of character and that kind of gimmick was always going to have hokey crap attached to it.
Yeah, and honestly, a lot of my grades, if they're kind of lower than people were expecting, most of the time it's probably going to be not because it's not the wrestler's fault, it's more how they were booked or positioned.
As it almost always is.
Yeah.
As it almost always is with these people. But I think that that's also a fair grade for The Undertaker. I mean, he's had a stellar career. There is not many others who have had the kind of longevity, the certain level of drawing power that The Undertaker had for as long as he had it. But, save in for those little moments that kind of reminded us, and particularly I think that the one thing that Undertaker feared was tarnishing his legacy by sticking around too long. And I think most people can recognize now that that is exactly what happened.
Yeah.
And I really like The Undertaker too. This is no knock on the guy whatsoever. It's just, but those last few matches, to the point where he had to get back into the ring to tag with Roman Reigns to redeem himself.
Yeah.
That should.
Although to be fair, I don't think anything that happened in the Goldberg match was his fault.
I don't either. I mean, he was still weaker, I mean, just because his body, you know, he's 50-something, you know? It's just that his body just isn't the same as it used to be. But I would agree with you on that. And I did not add the perpetrator of that match to the list because he didn't deserve to get a grade. Let's put it that way.
All right, Skylar, calm down. Shout out to you, Skylar Greenberg.
Shout out to you, Sky, who I kept the appearance of Mr. Geddon completely in the dark from him, and I'm hoping this is a nice little surprise that he's like, wait a second, you put the other guy on the show? Yes, I did, because you all deserve love, and there's only so much Colonial love to give.
I disagree. There's no such thing as enough. Anyway, let's move on.
See, that's right. What an uplift. This is why I have the guests on the show like that. Such an uplifting show. If you're not all feeling the warmth right now of what the Court-Martail podcast is supposed to be, this is it. Moving right along, let's move on to Roman Reigns.
Oh boy. Let me start this by saying that I love Roman Reigns. I think he's a really good wrestler.
I do too.
That said, C+.
Yeah.
I'm going with C+. And again, it's not his fault. It's not. Vince McMahon's rabid, insatiable boner for the guy.
Yep.
From late 2014 to, beginning of 2018, really.
Yeah.
Because 2018, Vince kind of backed off.
Until cancer.
He had more of a semi than a full-on chub for the guy.
Yeah.
In 2019.
Yeah.
So I can look past that, but from 2014 to 18, it was brutal.
I think a part of that was too is that it took Roman Reigns that amount of time to really be ready for that spot.
Mm-hmm.
Personally, I think that Reigns his mic skills just weren't ready when he started getting pushed.
Mm-hmm.
He was pushed way too early. His athletic ability, he really was so WWE format in that he had 5 moves and that was it. He was like very stereotype, archetype WWE format, which I think people saw right through, and that's why they turned on it so badly.
Yeah.
And it's like you said, I mean, I'm a big fan of Reigns too. He gets a reaction, a palpable reaction, more than anybody else. But the booking of him has been just so daft that they haven't cared that it's been vehement hatred. You know, it's just, and thank you. And it was just, it's just a shame what became of Reigns, and like in this time where I do not care at all about the modern wrestling product because it's just not the same without fans. I've really come to miss Roman Reigns. Out of anyone who I watched on those shows, he's the one guy I kind of really miss involvement with, in a weird way.
And also, screw Vince McMahon for being so angry with Roman Reigns for deciding his family and his health was more important.
I think, I don't want to cause any, this is going to be, I'll call it an unpopular opinion, a hot take, if you will. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But I think that Vince held something of a grudge on Roman Reigns for getting cancer. Because his push was never the same after he came back. As great as a moment it was when he said, I'm in remission, and everybody popped, and that was super cool, I don't think Vince ever forgave Roman Reigns for being unreliable for however long it was a time that Roman Reigns had to go battle a life-threatening disease, which McMahon wouldn't put over because Vince doesn't put anything over, as evidenced by his reaction to this entire situation that we're dealing with now.
I mean, not even a month after he was diagnosed, he had Dean Ambrose straight up refusing promos on it because it was so offensive.
Yeah.
What he was supposed to say.
Yeah.
I think you are right on target with that.
Yeah, I think that I really do think that Vince got actually upset at Roman Reigns for that. And I again, I'm not trying to put words in Vince's mouth. This is just speculation on my part. But his push was never the same. I think if Reigns does come back, we're never going to see him back in the main event again.
No.
I think that if Reigns comes back, which who knows, he's obviously the one cash cow, but because Vince doesn't care about stars anymore, he may just go to just can Reigns altogether, just shuffle him around, get him some mid-card wins, and start with something different. But we'll only and speaking of something different, as far as WWE champions goes, the next guy on the list is Kofi Kingston.
I would probably go with a B minus, something like that.
Agreed.
Maybe that's generous, but
I'd say that's probably right.
He's been there a long time, and even though he's always most of the time been a mid-carder, he did that very well.
He did.
He had some great matches.
He did.
And as much as I hate the New Day were a big tag team for a long time, and giving them a compliment hurts me a little bit. Although I did start to like them post 2019. So, and his WWE title reign, even though the ending of it was not the best, he had a pretty good title reign in my opinion.
5 seconds.
Yep.
5 seconds.
5 seconds.
But you know what? They made up for that by having him make a stand against Brock Lesnar at the Rumble.
Yeah.
I think that they definitely at least were able to continue telling that story, because Royal Rumble 2020 was one of the best booked Rumbles I've ever seen.
Oh, absolutely.
Might be maybe my favorite Rumble they've ever done.
I think you saying that's more controversial than you saying Vince got mad at him for having cancer. I think that's more controversial to say that the 2020 Rumble was good.
It really was, though. I mean, from start to finish, it was exciting. It was thrilling. It was the last pay-per-view with real fans that anyone gave a toss about.
But Sean, Brock Lesnar's boring. Haven't you heard?
But think about how many people he put over, even though he threw 13 or 14 or however many guys he threw over.
He put over a bunch of guys over the top rope.
Yeah, well, but think about what he did for Keith Lee.
Yeah.
You know,
Andrew McIntyre. And the pop when he booted Brock Lesnar's ass out of the ring was just insane.
And even the entertaining, like him Brock dancing to MVP's music.
Oh yeah.
That got MVP over even a little bit more. I mean, him and Shelton Benjamin doing the hug and referencing that. You know, the fight with Kofi to kind of bring back the idea that, hey, these two actually were in a world title match for 5 seconds, but they did a lot of storytelling with that they don't normally do, as far as interweaving multiple storylines together into one. And, and in Kofi's case, you know, I think Kofi's title run, I would agree, was good. They put some thought into who he fought and why he was facing them. They brought a lot of old storylines back. I really just wish that they had given Kofi a different theme song.
Yes.
Because the New Day theme did not fit a world's champion.
Give him his old SOS theme back.
Yeah, even that would have been fine. That I would have been totally cool with. But it just...
Another thing, which I'm still surprised they did, they rarely ever beat Kofi when he was champion. That's very much surprising.
Yeah, well, and I think that it was good. It was great seeing Kofi get that long of a reign, too. They wanted to make it count for what they did it for and why they did it, and as a reward for Kofi. I think that it was... And the match against Bryan was also terrific. You know, but I would agree. I would say B is probably accurate, just because you can't ignore the unimportant title reigns, the tag title reigns with like R-Truth and Evan Bourne and all the stuff that he did where he was just floating around doing, you know, he was just wherever.
Did you just besmirch the holy name of Air Boom?
Maybe. Maybe.
I can't believe you've done this.
Oh my God, I can't believe you've done this.
Oh, man.
Vine memes. Still applicable. Yeah. But, no, that was a great reference. But, yeah, it was just, I like Air Boom. That was at a time when I didn't really care about wrestling.
Yeah.
You know, that I had kind of been phasing out until I kind of immersed myself back in like 2013, 2014. But it was just, Kofi had so much time where you could be like, all right, what did he do during this time? And you have to be like, I don't know. I don't know what Kofi was doing. And for that alone, you know, he was a good mid-carder, but because he was just like in and out so often, I think B is an accurate grade.
Yeah.
Next up,
I think he's what you would describe as a good hand.
Yes, but not in a derogatory way.
Yeah.
Up next is Orton.
Randy Orton. Oh, he is one of my top favorites, so I'm going to have to try to remove my bias. Honestly, I can't decide between A- or B+, because he's been involved with some amazing stuff, and he's also been involved with some absolutely god-awful stuff.
Yep.
The feud with Bray Wyatt, for example, was absolutely atrocious from beginning to end.
Not his fault, but...
Again, not his fault. A lot of people think Randy Orton's boring. I am not one of them.
I think that he didn't ever want to reinvent himself once he found the winning formula.
Yeah.
That would be if I were to knock Randy Orton in any way, that's my critique of Randy Orton. Is once he found what worked for him, he never wanted to change what worked for him. And there's something to be said about that. But, you know, it's like when your dog has had 10 years of rolling over, and then your dog will refuse to learn how to give me paw or something like that. Orton's the same way. He rolled over, he got that pat. But there's no way he's going to lift up his paw and start doing, like, flips and stuff like that. You know, it's like... And I'm not saying that Orton should have been doing flips, but there was nothing to change up. Although...
Interesting analogy.
But you get my point.
Yes, I do.
It's like, it's just that Orton never really wanted to do more than what Orton already knew and could do and did well, which is not a knock.
But I will say, whenever he got motivated, he was, you could argue, better than everyone else in the company.
Oh, no doubt. I mean,
Orton...
Orton...
motivation, there's no one better than Randy Orton.
Yeah, I mean, Orton definitely lived up to his potential. You know, when he debuted in 2002, and the first thing that JR said was, this dude is a blue chipper right here. This guy is going to be the future of this company. And in many ways, JR, as always, was right. But I think that's an accurate grade. I would go along the lines of A-. I mean, between the world title reigns, his character development has changed very much throughout.
Yeah.
You know, in ways that are similar, but added subtle differences to his gimmick. But I would say Orton, for the length of the career he's had, he's not that old either. He started young, and he's still got some time on him. And truthfully, and you never hear Orton gets injured, but not very often.
Yeah.
He's always safe. You never hear a bad word about Orton, except maybe that he, you know, tries to have people shake his willy hand.
I'm so jealous of that one dude. Anyway.
I bet you are. I bet you are.
I want to apex his predator.
Yeah,
anyway.
well, and this is where I'm reminded why I only have you on the show like once every 3 or 4 months.
That did not come out of nowhere.
So no, it did not. And I knew that was coming. I knew something. Somebody was banging their fists on the mat, getting ready to strike, and launch that joke in. And now this has gone way too far.
Yeah.
So we are going to move on to Rey Mysterio.
When you say Rey Mysterio, all I can think is fake eyeball.
Why did he have? Why?
That.
Okay, try to erase the past 2 weeks out of your mind and then give Rey Mysterio a grade.
An eyeball match. Like, I'm going to need Tylenol after thinking about it. Oh my God.
And you can't spell Tylenol without I.
Stop that. Okay. I'm going to just pretend that he never came back to WWE. He just went to Lucha Underground and rode off into the sunset because, honestly, his WWE return, aside from being squashed by Samoa Joe at WrestleMania 35, has sucked. And some of the matches with Andrade. But other than that, it sucked.
You mean you didn't like when he and Dominic did a double 619 to Brock Lesnar?
Okay, I did forget about that. The match with Brock Lesnar was very good. And watching Brock Lesnar beat the shit out of Dominic was also ridiculously entertaining.
That was also fun.
Yeah, that was fun. Just ripping him straight out of the crowd, just tossing him around. It was hilarious. So I honestly would give him... He's sort of in the same boat as Kofi. He was always a mid-carder, but he was like a better version of Kofi Kingston because he was a better wrestler. So I'm just going to give him a solid A-.
I think that's fair. I would honestly rank him a little bit higher only because of the legacy that he's left as really putting the Lucha Libre style on a really worldwide basis.
Yeah, when you think of Lucha Libre, you don't think of Sin Cara, you don't think of El Torito, you think of Rey Mysterio.
Yeah, unless you're really like adept into the Mexican wrestling scene and you know more about Lucha, like, and you know El Santo and Blue Demon Jr. and all those people. Yeah. But if you don't, I mean, if somebody just said to somebody randomly on the street Lucha Libre, most of the time the answer you're gonna get is Rey Mysterio.
And he's like, you could say he's like a modern day Mil Mascaras.
Yes, he's got such a legacy about him too that I think just for that alone, I mean, the fact that he was doing moves way ahead of their time in ECW and WCW, and then WWE having that whole mid-run, getting the world title and being able to run with that for a little bit, just what he was able to do, just his entire career always had some depth to it. You know, it wasn't even just that. He wasn't just a depth-defying high flyer either. He had personality.
Yeah, he had amazing matches.
Yeah, he knew psychology well in order to tell different stories with different guys. I mean, again, what he did, the amount of numbers he boosted from joining Lucha Underground, was huge. I mean, that was a huge part of him coming in and continuing to be himself, but still adding more depth to who he was and why he was doing what he was doing. Truth be told, Ray has had a once-in-a-lifetime career where somebody his size in American wrestling style would never have gotten were it not for somebody like him to pave the way for that.
And he has an insane amount of dedication. I mean, can you imagine loving wrestling so much that you're willing to pop your own eyeball out of its socket for a show?
It takes a lot of dedication to hold in your trunks a painted ping pong ball and hold it next to your face for the camera shot.
Yeah.
That is such a dedicated man.
Yeah.
And I feel for Ray.
He had his eye on the prize.
Yes, he did. And before everybody else looks away because of how grotesque a sight that was, we got two more here for you, and then we're going to move on.
Okay.
The next one is Bray Wyatt. I found this one the toughest to grade.
C-. And it's not his fault. It's absolutely not his fault.
Why they felt the need to bungle this poor guy up so badly.
The story of Bray Wyatt is build up an insane amount of momentum and run face first into a brick wall.
It's tragic. Bray Wyatt's story is a tragedy. It is a straight up tragedy.
Absolutely depressing.
From how so important his stuff was, where he's really actually getting into Cena's head and getting that. And then he loses to Cena at Mania, and then it just got downhill.
And then he had a child with the demon voice.
Then he lost every single feud, I think, he was in from then until 2018. Then he randomly won an Elimination Chamber.
Yeah, he held the WWE title
for a month. Lost it in an insects over the screen, over the mat match.
That Randy Orton
won with the legitimately most out of nowhere, out of place RKO you've ever seen.
And then he finally beat Randy Orton because of Jinder Mahal. God, I hated 2017.
That was a rough year. Was a rough year. And then after that, he disappears, shows up as the Fiend, looked great, won the title, big mistake on Halloween, and then lost it to Goldberg.
Yep.
And now he's fighting in a swamp with two of him around. And I don't even know what to say with this guy. It's like this guy has such ability. His charisma is off the wall.
This is the worst stop and start and stop booking I've ever seen.
This dude could read the phone book, and you'd sit there and you'd listen to him for an hour as he read the phone book. That's how captivating he is as a talker. He can work, he draws crowds in, he's captivating to watch, and then they just decide they want nothing to do with him. Is it a weight thing? Is it just because he looks pudgy?
Probably, knowing how knowing how amazingly classy Vince McMahon is.
I don't understand what Wyatt did to deserve what he's gotten. And I mean, in all fairness, I'm sure that they consider Wyatt having all these cinematic matches now a main event push. Yeah, exactly. That chordled chuckle is exactly what my sentiments are about that.
That wasn't a chuckle. That was a vomit noise.
Yeah, exactly. It's just, I really like Bray. Full disclosure, I really, really like Bray Wyatt. But you can't grade him anything higher than that, I don't think. Because it's not his fault. It's what we've been shown, what we're supposed to be, what we've been told about this guy and what capabilities he has in the ring. This is what he's given us.
Starts off strong, sputters out, never finishes.
And now, here comes the big one.
Oh no.
Because he is the reason that Bray Wyatt is graded at C-. He is the reason that I couldn't put Kevin Owens above a B. He's the reason I didn't even add Rusev onto this list. Do you see where I'm going with this?
I see why you wanted me on the show now, so you could torment me some more.
Because, listen, I made up for it. I'll make you feel better soon.
To be fair, I deserve it because I put Nicholas on your team.
You did. Hey, but I made that work. To y'all fairness, I made that work. And by the way, stay tuned for a couple weeks from now because I have the follow-up to that. Nicholas is going to be appearing on week 3. So keep your heads and eyes open for Atlantic Coast Pro Wrestling. But our last one here,
wild murder. Anyway, continue.
You can see where I was going, but you can't see him because our last one is John Cena. How do you grade a man that you cannot see?
I'm going to give him, honestly, like his everything, removing my bias.
Which is a tough ask, folks.
Which is a tough ask.
I'm asking a lot.
For longer than 5 seconds. If you know me for longer than 5 seconds, you know this is very difficult.
This is.
I'm going to give John a B.
Okay.
Because I hate watching him wrestle, but he can do certain things very well, and he was the top of the company for 10 years. And they do have a fan base. It's not like everyone stopped watching wrestling when he was on top. A lot of people did.
A lot did.
But not everyone. And he does have a legion of fans, and he did make somewhat of a transition to Hollywood. He's had some great matches, although I think a lot of his matches are overrated, namely the John Cena AJ Styles match at SummerSlam 2016, and that is the hill I will die on. But yeah, I'm going to give him a B. If I'm being completely fair, I'm going to give him a B.
And you know, I would say anywhere between, my personal grade was a B+ to an A- if you're feeling generous about him. But in truth, it's hard to say that it's Cena's fault. You know, it's in a way, because truthfully, the only reason that the Nexus didn't get over, and I had Wade Barrett on this list, we just didn't get to it, but the reason the Nexus didn't get over, the reason all these guys didn't get over, the only one that really you can blame on John was probably the Nexus, because John's the one who said, no, I think even John said he didn't think he should have gone over, and McMahon said, no, you're going over. Really, a lot of the reason John was Super Cena was that Vince wanted John to be Super Cena. You know,
not events, ladies and gentlemen.
I heard an interview just recently that John, after losing to The Rock, wanted to turn heel very badly, and said now is the time. And Vince turned it down. You know, as John was going into his downward spiral, and then there was a potential to have a babyface Rock versus an actual heel John Cena. That next year's WrestleMania, if they were going to do another twice in a lifetime, they were going to do a turn, but it was nixed. You know, I think the reason that John was so frustrating is that his character never changed. He did the exact same thing all the time because that's what Vince wanted, and so that's what John wanted. And I think that's also why so many fans turned away while he was the figurehead of the company.
Sean, how can you turn heel if you rise above hate?
Well, think about his 2012 though. He had to embrace the hate. That's how it started.
God, that was so dismal.
He had to embrace the hate. Then he lost to The Rock, and then his there's divorce and things. The stuff they actually used in the story when they did the Twice in a Lifetime. But somehow still, the John Laurinaitis, that whole deal. It was just John could have had a much more diverse career.
Yeah.
If he had been allowed to by the guy who's actually making all the decisions.
To be fair, to Vince, though, it's not like Vince told John Cena to put his arms a mile away from someone's mouth when he puts in the STF, but just saying.
No, I'm not saying that John doesn't deserve some level of credit for what many people believe him that he couldn't wrestle. There's certain things that you have to give to John. I like some Cena matches. I don't like all Cena matches because in a very similar style, because of WWE's format, they like that cookie cutter champion.
Yeah.
He always has. Hulk Hogan, he drew buckets of money for that company because he was an incredible talker, in a very similar way to Cena, and he drew people in, and he had a tremendous figure, but really, Hulk Hogan was a cookie cutter champion. How many matches ended with Hulk up, 3 fists, big boot, leg drop?
To be fair, the wrestling world didn't have that many cookies back then.
Well, it didn't have that many cookies, and not everybody knew what was going on in the pro wrestling business. There was, a lot of people did, but there was still some level of, well, maybe these guys really are in a fight. There was still that level of suspicion to some degree. Or at least there was some semblance of that. So
the WWE got even more butter and dough to make more cookies, like with The Rock and Austin. I can sense the more cookie jokes coming, and we should probably stop while we're ahead.
Yeah, otherwise we're gonna sound. This is gonna be turned into a way too half-baked episode of this show. But
that's what you call bringing it home, ladies and gentlemen.
That's right. So the last bit, my last little piece on John, John was a product of the format that he very willingly accepted as what he was going to do.
Yeah.
And that, for better or worse, I would also agree. You and I have talked about this dozens of times. His SummerSlam 2016 match, I take that match over his Royal Rumble 2017 match only because there were way few spam finishers.
Oh, I agree. I like the 2016 SummerSlam match. I just think it's overrated. The 2017 Royal Rumble match is the same match except more finishers, and I think that also set the archetype for that kind of finish not being as fun as it used to be. Yeah.
But speaking of things that are more fun than they used to be, I think we've hit the second half of the show, and you know it, Mr. Geddon. I know what that means, and everybody there knows what that means. Hit that intro.
What time is it? It's the fight, it's the brawl, it's the match of the week. It's tonight, watch along with the son of a beat. It's one fall, the down for the 1, 2, and 3. So don't stall, hang on to the edge of your seat. We got a punch and a flip and a powerbomb too. All the moves and the stars are all under review. See the babyface cheered and the heels get heat. This is wrestling at its peak. It's the match of the week.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen, it is Match of the Week time, and I chose a doozy. And now, I chose this doozy specifically for you, JoshAgeddon.
Because you've been tormenting me so.
Because I have been harassing and haranguing you and making you watch the Great Khali try. So at this point...
I'm running out of wrist to cut, Sean.
At this point, I need to save you some skin space. Yeah. So we're going to talk about one of what I consider a terrific, maybe one of the best spot fest style matches of all time. Samoa Joe versus AJ Styles versus Christopher Daniels for the X Division Championship, Unbreakable 2005. Why don't you start with your impressions of this match and what you took out of it rewatching it?
I thought it was fantastic. Honestly, from start to finish, the whole thing, in my opinion, was great. Although The first thing I loved about it was Christopher Daniels' theme song. It's a remix of Marilyn Manson's song "Disposable Teens," and you know me, I love some Marilyn Manson.
I do.
Already off to a good start.
Yeah, and that might be Daniels' best theme that he's ever had.
Oh yeah, Disposable Teens is just, it's otherworldly. But yeah, the whole match was insane. Everything was like solid connection on everything. Everything was stiff. And stiff in a good way. Not they were actually hurting each other, although AJ did get his nose busted open.
At the very end.
All the spots were flawless. Everything was great. Everything flowed well.
It was super creative, some of the stuff that they were coming up with.
I mean, like Samoa Joe jumping over the top rope with that corkscrew senton. Well, not a senton, it was a tope.
Yeah.
And AJ pulling out the springboard shooting star press and the spiral tap. Just what's not to like about this match? And AJ Styles, I still don't know how he's able to get Samoa Joe up for the torture rack.
I popped for the torture rack. That was so out of nowhere, and then for him to actually just like do a torture rack in the middle of this massive spot induced and set, that was creative. You know, if you know me more than 5 seconds, you know that I enjoy my good old-fashioned wrestling. You know, the old school stuff, you know, from the 70s, 80s, early 90s, you know, that old style. This match reminds me how much fun a spot fest can really be. With some good psychology thrown into it that ties it together with some selling. That's right. I'm looking straight at you, Young Bucks. I'm looking directly into your eyes when I make that statement. And it's just
another thing I loved about this match is there was even some good comedy in this match when they were kicking Christopher Daniels over and over, and he stood up and said, "Stop kicking me," and then they both kicked him just immediately.
You know, that's a small one, but it works. It works.
This match had everything.
It did, and even though it did have the in-ring intros, you know what I really liked about these in-ring intros? Not just JB, because JB's cool. Nobody pandered to the hard cam in the exact same way they always pander to the hard cam. When they mentioned Samoa Joe's name, you know where he looked? He looked right at AJ Styles and right at Christopher Daniels.
Yeah.
He didn't have no time to stand over there and go, "Oh, look at me, I'm a big guy, hard cam, I'm on television."
That's right, people at home. He said my name.
That's right, yeah. I hate that about WWE intros, and they didn't do that here. And it was just, that's how you do an in-ring intro. Keep the people who are being introduced focused on what they're trying to do. Like you said, everything looks so clean, but looks so stiff. Samoa Joe, 2005 Samoa Joe.
Yeah.
Was just so solid. I mean, I love the Daniels doing that running kick into the Bulldog that he hit. You know, but what's great about matches like this is that each move isn't just about setting up the next spot. Once again, looking directly into the eyes of the Young Bucks when I say this. A lot of the reason that I have a problem with modern day Spot Fest is that they don't take the time to sell and to make, you know, and the reason that they don't take the time to sell, what ends up happening is that it just looks like people are just getting hit, falling down, getting up and being like, okay, time to do the next spot. Let's run over and get to the next spot. Instead of, ow, that hurt, I'm in pain, somebody's beating me, I need to do something, and having those little moments register.
You get the feeling that each of these guys aren't just doing moves, they're trying to win the match.
Right. Exactly. And that is lost on a lot of today's wrestling. Specifically looking directly into the eyes of the Young Bucks once again.
John, we get it.
Sorry, I'm getting
at ease.
I'm like hard cam staring down the pike, like. But anyway, I didn't mean for this to be a knock on the Young Bucks, but.
Yes, you did. What do you mean?
You're right. I can't even lie about that. One thing I didn't really care for in this match, it was one thing super small, not even important, and they fixed it later. There were an awful lot of forearms being thrown instead of punches. And that is something that has permeated the wrestling world. I know that's so small a detail, but nobody throws a punch anymore, except Drew McIntyre. He throws a mean punch.
Oh, yeah.
But nobody throws a punch anymore. But as soon as I said that, 5 minutes later, Christopher Daniels just starts wailing on Samoa Joe with punches. And Joe starts coming back with us. So we did get some punches after that, but there were a lot of forearms to start, which is just... But then AJ makes me forget all about that with the springboard shooting star. Then they did the monkey flip into the Hurricanrana.
Oh, that was so nuts.
Which was so nuts. The only thing that I didn't like about that was Joe looked like he was kind of just waiting around for it to happen.
Yeah.
You know, it was in the monkey flip. But again, the nits I am picking are so small.
Yeah. And when Samoa Joe hit the muscle buster, there was a brief, a second or two where it looked like he was just waiting around.
Yeah.
But speaking of Samoa Joe, I do have one other nitpick, and it's not just with this match, it's every Samoa Joe match. Whenever someone jumps out of the ring on Samoa Joe, he doesn't bump, he just falls to his hands and knees, and it looks awkward. And I love Samoa Joe, but this is the only thing he does that I hate. It just looks awkward. Anytime anyone jumps on him from outside, from the inside of the ring to the outside, he catches them and falls on his hands and knees, and it just looks weird.
Yeah. You know, I've never really noticed that as Samoa Joe, but I'll have to take a peek at that on more, because that's actually something subtle that I did not catch. And speaking of out-of-ring bumps, AJ getting tossed over the top and then getting 3 extra feet of air over the top rope and then falling flat.
Dude was a pancake.
Dude, that was insane. That's one of the few times that, there's always those moments as wrestling fans where, even though you know all the spots are, they're all spots, even you're just oh!
Yes.
Oh! Absolutely. That was that, oh, damn moment.
Yeah.
Was out of that. I really appreciate Daniels trying to still be a heel in this matchup. Because the spot, when you have so many spots like this, it's hard to actually distinguish heel babyface dynamics. Because the moves are so spectacular that everyone's loving the moves and everybody kind of cheers everybody. But I give props to Daniels for still doing thumbs to the eyes and still raking in and trying to heel it up, and still trying to make people cheer for him less, which they did sometimes. Whenever he did that, they did cheer less. I noticed that. So
another thing that he did, speaking of that, was very, very, very subtle. It's a blink and you'll miss the kind of thing. Whenever he would do a move and someone would roll out of the ring, he would get mad that they rolled out of the ring like a dick would.
Yes.
Because babyfaces rarely ever get mad when someone rolls out of the ring. They get exhausted. They're like, oh, man, but they don't get pissed.
Yeah.
But he should get pissed when someone rolls out of the ring after they do a move. Daniels did that several times in the match, and I loved it.
Yeah, and this is what, as I said before, even the fans, I love that the fans were cheering for the stars, even in this whole thing, even though it was a big spot fest. You heard Daniels and Styles get cheers more than, you didn't hear fans going fight forever. Which goes to show the intelligence level of fans, obviously not talking about us. We are the most intelligent people on the face of the wrestling world, hence why we have this podcast. But the fans cheering fight forever, I think that is the dumbest chant.
It was good once.
Is that during Sami Zayn and Nakamura?
Yep. That was actually fine.
Yep.
But then they did it for every match where that was sort of good.
Yeah. Every
sort of good match, to great match, to awesome match has that chant. And I'm just like, well, that chant's dead.
Yep, they killed it. Like the CM Punk chant, it was running to the ground. Joe hit a fantastic German suplex that looked absolutely devastating.
Oh man, yes, it absolutely did.
And then
killed this guy with it.
And then the whole thing with the belt. Now I want to get your take on this because it's an interesting. I thought it was interesting the way they did it, but it also conflicted with the rules of a triple threat match. So, for those of you who have not watched this, the link is in the description to watch it. So, while Joe, I think, hits that German on AJ, Daniels goes and gets the X Division Championship. Daniel goes to hit Joe with it. Joe gets it from Daniels, and then Joe's looking at it, and I think Daniels just got knocked to the ground, and Joe's saying, oh yeah, you want to keep this, blah, 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 blah. And then he goes to turn around, and then the ref takes the belt, tries to take the belt from Joe before he can use it. Joe yanks it away from the ref, and then Daniels hits an enziguri into the belt, into Joe's face, and knocks it down. I thought that move was great. I thought that whole sequence was great. However, if it's a triple threat match, then there are no disqualifications, technically.
I think this, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't TNA used to do triple threat matches where, like, there were disqualifications? Because there have been triple threat matches, like, back in the day that did have disqualifications.
I think it's possible. I don't have enough information offhand to refute your claim.
The way they played it off, where Samoa Joe had the belt and he never used it, and then the referee tried to take it from him, and Joe was like, "No, that makes me think, okay, there are disqualifications in this match."
Yeah, I thought that was great, but then shouldn't the referee have disqualified Daniels for doing the enziguri into the belt into Joe?
Did the referee see him do it?
I believe so. Because he didn't take the belt away from him. You see, like, again, this is like such nitpicking. I thought the spot itself was super well constructed as far as why, how the belt would transfer hands, the not technically using it maliciously against somebody, but just using it almost as a defensive way with the enziguri. I thought it was all great. I'm talking on a technicality point here.
Yeah.
So it's just like, I'm not trying to take anything away from this match. At this point, I was having so much fun. Daniels hit a crossroads out of nowhere. Joe, the only thing I noticed about this, and this may be the camera guy's fault, Joe gets an STF, and he's holding it on to Daniels, and then the camera cuts to Joe's face, and Joe doesn't have enough time to either tuck his head or turn the other way, so you can see Joe calling the next spot.
Yep, I noticed that too.
And that also could be because Joe was not in the business for that long at this time. It could just be an inexperience thing where he just didn't know where the camera was and didn't know to turn his head or whatever. It doesn't really matter. It's just I did catch it, and
yeah, me too.
And then AJ hit him with a torture rack, and I didn't care anymore.
Not only he didn't just do the rack bomb. He racked this boy.
Yeah, for a good chunk of time.
For like a long time, and it was just AJ Styles is something else. Shocking information, I know.
I know. He is indeed phenomenal, and this was him at his best. And then the counter of the Angel's Wings into that Northern Lights style pin, but not having Joe pinned so Joe can keep his undefeated streak. Just brilliant booking.
Yep.
It was great that he was just able to. It was just on a counter, so it wasn't like a definitive finisher pin. It's over. You were able to keep the feud going between AJ Styles and Daniels, because I think it was the pay-per-view after this that Styles and Daniels had the 30-minute Iron Man.
No, I think...
Or was that before?
That was before, because the commentators were talking about that match during the Triple Threat.
Oh, you're right. No, you're right. Because they were all in this time frame, but they were still keeping that feud going.
Yes.
And it was just... I thought that this was so much fun. It reminded me how great TNA was. How enjoyable a spot fest can be when you got three guys who know what they're doing to do it. Just all around terrific.
Yeah, and another fun fact about the not necessarily this match, but the show. You know that this was the main event of the show. The X Division title was the main event.
Yeah.
And
it was important at the time.
Oh yeah, and you know who the World Heavyweight Champion was, who retained the match before this?
Was that Raven or Jeff Jarrett?
It was Raven.
It was Raven.
Who is, of course, my uncle's favorite wrestler.
So, and Raven, I thought Raven did deserve that NWA title bout, but I feel like in this situation, that X Division was just a little bit more of the essence in establishing TNA's identity. No knock on Raven at all, because I like Raven a lot.
Yeah. Me too.
But now we go to our Superstar Spotlight. And this one, we're going to talk about real briefly before the network pulls the plug on us. We're going to talk about one of the three participants in this match. Let's talk about Samoa Joe. Samoa Joe, I thought that Joe at first was so well booked in TNA, and then he joined that Frontline faction to fight, I think, the Main Event Mafia. That whole airy time frame is a little shady, but then he had the face paint and the shorts. He got tutelage of Taz, and then he joined the Main Event Mafia. And then
remember the Nation of Violence where he killed Scott Steiner with a sword?
Yes. It was a very weird time for Joe.
Don't you love wrestling, ladies and gentlemen?
It's kind of, well, and that was part of, I think, that what hurt Joe is because Joe, up to that point, was wrestler. And then they added something sports entertainment-y into him. And it kind of, dwindled him a little bit. Then he kind of just drifted around for a little bit in TNA. Didn't really do a whole lot. Showed back up to be a part of the second iteration of the Main Event Mafia. And then went to NXT. When he went to NXT, things were great. He was having good feuds with Balor. And then he hurt Tyson Kidd, came to the main roster, and then was hurt from now until perpetuity. And I'm pretty sure that, save for maybe one or two more matches left, that Samoa Joe is pretty much done.
Okay, I have a controversial opinion.
Go for it.
I do not like Samoa Joe on commentary.
I don't either.
Okay,
I don't either. I think he's cheesy. I think he's super cheesy.
He's so cheesy.
Yeah. It's like, no offense to Joe. Joe can cut a hell of a promo. Just commentate. He's not a commentator. He's a badass. Also, again, just like with everyone else we've been talking about on this podcast, I don't think it's him. I think it's the crap he's being told to say. It's the over-manufacturing of WWE's commentary, which has been a problem for over a decade now.
Yeah.
But I also think that Samoa Joe, in essence, is just not a commentator.
Yeah.
I still believe that he is a hell of a promo cutter. He can talk his ass off.
It's the Nation of Violence, not the Nation of Promos.
Yeah. Well, it's not the nation of sitting at a desk with a fedora and talking about other wrestlers.
Yeah.
But my favorite, I mean, I really don't think Joe got that promo cutting ability until he actually worked with Sting in that second iteration of the Main Event Mafia. Because you could definitely tell a personality shift in him and what he was able to present as a promo than he did at the beginning. Although his Turning Point 2007 shoot promo is definitely an interesting one to look at. Have you seen it?
No, I have not.
You have to look up his shoot promo.
I have some homework to do tonight, ladies and gentlemen.
His Turning Point shoot promo, what happened was Scott Hall pulled a Scott Hall. And I love Scott, but he no-showed the event. This is 2007. This is like right in the thick of his demons. And Samoa Joe was pissed because it was like it was supposed to be like a 3-on-3 match or something along those lines. Hall never showed up. Joe gets the mic and he goes, I was supposed to come out here and cut a promo on you guys, but you know what? I've got a live mic on a pay-per-view.
Oh no!
And
when
pretty
someone
much
says that, that's when you're like, oh, this is gonna be good.
And that's exactly what they said too. It's like, and they pretty much let him air out the fact that he was pissed that Scott didn't show up, and has one of my favorite all-time lines of the lamest, one of the lamest shots at somebody ever. He goes, Scott Hall, you punked out, and you're a punk. And just the way he said it was just like, you could tell he was shooting, because it just wasn't as eloquent. It was almost like instead of getting like mashed potatoes that are like out of the box and they're nice and creamy, you're getting like lumpy potatoes.
Yes.
And that was Samoa Joe's shoot promo. Fun fact about that promo, and have this in mind too when you watch this. When after that promo in the locker room, Nash went up to Joe, because Nash was in the ring the whole time. He said, "Was what you said in there, was that yours or was it Russo's?" And Joe said it was mine, and Nash slapped the shit out of him.
Ooh,
and said, don't disrespect me, don't disrespect Scott. Joe came back up, thought he was going to hit him, smacked him down again, and the next day Joe apologized in front of the whole locker room. So interesting things going on with Joe, but his in-ring work has always been incredibly solid.
Absolutely. Dare I say, phenomenal. Although that's not his thing.
It's not his thing. But, I mean, I don't know whether you've seen that 2008 match between him and Angle. I think it was in that cage. I think it was a cage match where Angle thought he was an MMA fighter.
I've seen highlights of it.
That's a match worth watching. It might be the best Samoa Joe and Kurt Angle match that they've ever had.
I remember the infamous headbutt.
Yes. Yes,
I remember that.
There were a few things in that match, but Joe has always had that level of intensity. He always looked good, even though I will say I think that another reason why Vince never took to him is that he had a more stocky figure, if you know what I mean.
I think I know what you mean, Sean.
You know, I'm trying to be very careful and distinctive with my wording here. Because there were some times when Joe was a lean, mean Samoan submission machine. And there were some times when he was just a Samoan submission machine.
I think I'm picking up what you're putting down.
Yeah, if you get what I mean. And that has fluctuated over the years, and I think that's why Vince never really warmed up to Joe. But there's so much about what Joe has done as far as like being able to do the spotfest, but also being able to work a really good singles match and tell a good story and captivate and work the crowd. He's always been good at that. Samoa Joe has always been, in my view, probably one of the top 5 talents of the 2000s, so to speak, as far as guys who really were able to put the work in when they needed to, cut the promo, which developed over time but really became one of his strongest assets. And it's just a shame how, like usual, it's just a shame how he went to WWE and then his career took a nosedive.
It's sad how many people you can apply that to.
It really is. It really is. As I was preparing for this show at the beginning of, earlier in the day, I kind of got depressed at that thought. I was like, how many guys can we say? And then they went to WWE and that was the end of them. It's too many. Too many people.
Yep. Too many.
And Joe, you've got my respect. I miss him in the ring, but when he's got matches like that under his belt, like we just watched.
Oh yeah, if you haven't seen this triple threat match, or I think they did a rematch except for the world title a couple of years later. That match is also really good. Not as good as the Unbreakable 2005 one, but it's still pretty good.
Yeah, and there's so much Samoa Joe you can look up and watch to get a scope of what he is. I mean, I'm no fan of Balor, but even his matches with Balor, I really liked.
Especially the one, I can't remember, I think it was TakeOver London, where Joe got busted open and they kept stopping the match and the crowd just eviscerated, and it was even FPG chant. So. Yeah,
I remember that. That was, Joe's got, I do respect Samoa Joe for what he is. I wish that we had been able to see Joe on a more mainstream level working with a company that would have protected his interests. But unfortunately, all we got was WWE.
Yeah.
But also props to Joe for putting TNA on the map, because he was a big portion of that too.
Oh yeah.
A big portion of why TNA got as good as they got was because of Samoa Joe. So a guy who's
matches made lift.
Yes, and a guy who's definitely left his mark on the business, just as we have left a mark on the podcasting world. But with that said, It is time for our first commercial break. JoshAgeddon, thank you very much for being on the show. Everybody go watch TAW Gaming. There is parts of JoshAgeddon you would not have imagined you'd see on film.
Also, I have a pay-per-view coming up. Don't know when, but I have TAW UCT Adrenaline, which is my Extreme Rules, except there's not going to be a dumbass swamp fight. There's just going to be, wrestling matches. It's just
going to be eyeball removal. We're sticking to one gimmick.
Eyeball removal. We're going to be removing various extremities on TAW
Yeah, but just
Adrenaline.
Appendages are coming off. We're going to have appendages on a pole match. It's going to be great.
Yeah. Yes.
It's going to be great. You watch. The ring's going to be filled with prosthetics. We're just going to have people going over. Zach Gowen's going to be a referee. It's going to offend so many people.
Oh, yes.
But in a good way. Thank you so much, Josh, again, for being on the show.
No problem, man.
And we are going to take our first commercial break, so we will see you next time. Thank you very much for watching, ladies and gentlemen. We will be back right after these messages.